listening to another episode of Smash the Bug podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell, and I'm bringing to you a guest. His name is TJ Gamble. He is the well-known founder and CEO of Jamersan, but even better well-known as the dude behind Ecommerce Aholic. Yes, I'm sure we've all seen his face, his pretty face all over YouTube and LinkedIn and all these wonderful places. And he's bringing a really cool series. And I know Smash the Bug is primarily for developers, but as developers, we don't live within a vacuum of just putting together code all day long. We are putting together code for merchants. If we are e-commerce developers, and if you listen to this, you're an e-commerce developer, we're putting together code for merchants. And TJ is going through, and I'm super excited about this, a series of launching a online business from $0 to $1 million. And the question you're going to ask, and actually maybe we should ask this together, because I think that it'll be just as applicable for TJ to answer it. And I won't inject my opinion here. So, with all that to say, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to Smash the Bug on our Swift Otter YouTube channel, or on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcast, or Apple Podcasts. We're there. You can find us there. So, without further ado, let's bring in TJ and let's hear directly from him what he does and what he's been really excited about here lately. Welcome, TJ.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you having me. I don't know if I have a lot to add to what I do. I mean, that was a pretty good intro there. Jamersan is an agency, so we obviously are an agency that does e-commerce implementations. Ecommerce Aholic is our content division, where we put out what we try to focus on is practical content for e-commerce merchants.
It's really powerful and it's good. And and I especially like how you've nailed it with this latest series. And obviously there's a lot of pressure on you because you got to get that site to $1 million. So we're looking forward to seeing how you're going to do that. I'm sure you have some great ideas that most of them you've not shared yet.
Well, the great thing is there's no pressure, because if I don't make it, that's good content. Like, what we're trying to do is show that this is not easy. And so if it is a struggle, that's even better. Like, if I throw the site together and it goes to $1 million the first month, that's not great content, because I don't feel like I'm giving anybody any practical. Well, I mean, it would be great content. Let me rephrase that. I don't think it would be as useful to the audience we're trying to speak to.
Well, I get that.
So yeah. I don't feel any pressure. Like, I don't get embarrassed. That's one of those things I was blessed with from my father. So there's no embarrassment in failure. But we do obviously want to be successful with that, and we're very much looking forward to phase 2, which is actually getting the site live and trying to get sales with it.
That's great. Well, you say let's just put it this way: if you brought it to $1 million in, I don't know, whatever, a very short time frame, I think you should start pulling some YouTube ads, talking about how this is the next, don't do FBA anymore, don't do this or that. This is the next way to get a 7-figure business. And you have a Lamborghini in the background, and you'll have it really good.
Well, that's one of the reasons we started doing the series. Being a YouTuber and putting out a lot of content on YouTube. Most of our content to this point has been really more bottom of the funnel sales content from an SEO perspective. So we're trying to target key terms that merchants are looking for, Shopify versus BigCommerce, BigCommerce versus Magento, that kind of stuff. And those have been very successful. We've got a lot of leads and opportunities from those. But we wanted to go a little wider, and looking at the e-commerce landscape on YouTube, there's a lot of really bad advice, really short-sighted advice. Anything that anyone actually shares about building a business, what they did was they built a drop shipping site. They picked a product. They maybe scaled it a little bit. They don't share their profit. Lord knows they did $100,000 in sales. It may have cost them 120. We don't know. But the site has already run its course. Like, they've already given up on it before they ever show it. So they're not actually showing how to build a business.
That's right.
They're just showing how to run Facebook ads and get some sales. And so we want to show, go more in depth in that, show every single aspect of it. And, how do you actually go about building something that's scalable, that's sustainable, starting with low risk and then working your way into something that's more elaborate.
That's awesome. I am super excited to see this. And let me just ask you this is a question. I know I kind of diverted myself with the idea of getting you on screen here sooner. Do you think this would be applicable for developers? So you have developers that are working for you. Is this something that you would encourage your devs to watch, to follow through this process? Well, I know they'll be intrinsically following through the process at some level because I'm sure they might be helping you. But is this something you would encourage your developers, and by extension other developers, e-commerce developers across the world, to follow along? Do you think they will get value from it, or do you think it's better for the merchants, aspiring merchants, that group of people?
Well, as far as my developers go, like, we're trying very hard to not engage them too much on this project. Like, that's part of it. Like, if you were starting a business, not you necessarily, but somebody in general, they're not going to have a bunch of developers on staff. So we're trying to not, take advantage of that and show what it's actually like, just with experience and not necessarily the resources. But from just a general perspective, we definitely don't dumb it down. Like, we're going to talk technical. We're going to talk to you like you know what you're talking about. So developers, I think, would appreciate the content. And from, if I were a developer, which I am, I have a degree in computer science. I was a Magento developer for many, many years before I started, really being more on the business side of things.
Sure.
The more you understand around e-commerce in general, the strategy, the context of what you're doing, and not necessarily the technical of what you're doing, the more career options you're going to have going forward.
Yes.
So engaging in this type of content and learning more about what the business owners are thinking, what they're trying to do, and maybe you even know more about what they're trying to do, so you can advise them on it. The better your success is going to be individually.
I love it. And that was what I was thinking, but I think you put it in way better words than I could have put it into. But absolutely, I think that's great. Well, let me put it this way. I've seen so many times where a merchant requests something to be done. The developer does exactly that, sends it back to the merchant, pushes it out to production, whatever, and the merchant's like, well, that's not really what I wanted, or this doesn't work with this other part that well. And so I think having that perspective, and even the ground up, starting from zero to hero, it's good for all e-commerce developers to really have that foundation. Ultimately, someday they might be interacting with the merchant. Who knows? Depending on the agency, but that context is critical. So I guess enough of that. But it was just I'm really excited to see that. I think that the benefits to developers are significant in that series too. So very excited. Thank you for investing the time and putting this type of information together. All right, well, let's jump into the next. That was kind of our first. Well, it was a kind of an unofficial question that we just came up with there. But the question number one that we're going to talk about was e-commerce has changed this world a lot. Obviously, COVID accelerated it. I don't know, 5-10 years that plus. I don't know, somewhere in there. It's been significant. What would you say, how do you think that has changed the merchant to the agency relationship? And again, also kind of if we can extend that out to the developer. So because ultimately developers work for an agency, they put together they fulfill these requirements, they build these projects for them, for a merchant. How do you think what can developers do to really help the agency distinguish themselves as really being an excellent agency, like the agency that is going to solve those problems, the agency that's going to see the big picture as opposed to a whole bunch of little things that don't fit together? What are your thoughts around a truly excellent agency and as well as the developers that work for it?
Sure. Knowing your content, right? A lot of your content is around education. Mostly education from a technical perspective.
Yes,
but
exactly.
It goes back to the content we're talking about. Education is absolutely important to developers in every aspect, because with the acceleration of e-commerce, it was already very, very difficult for merchants to see the bigger picture. They're always going to have limited resources. Now, sometimes it's a large amount of resources, but it's still limited for the size of their business. And their job is not to know everything that's going on in the e-commerce landscape. Their job is to know what's going on with their business. And so they don't necessarily always know how their needs map to the technologies available or best practices or what things they're not doing up to the level that they should be doing them. And so it's our job as an agency to make sure we're bringing those ideas to the table, that we are a true partner to the merchant and that we're not just order takers. And so every level of an agency that can have that understanding, that can have that education, that can bring ideas to the table, the better you're going to be able to serve that merchant and make sure you're putting them on the right path to success.
Absolutely. That's great. And I guess some of that, like you say, comes through the education, so obviously prior experience will help accelerate that going forward. You're going to learn off of previous projects like, oh, wow, that didn't work out so well or as well as we thought it was going to work out. And then you're going to have other and then you'll be able to take that learning. And there's also that external, just understanding the big picture of how everything fits together. That's really great. Working with developers, you employ, I think, quite a number of developers. What would you say are the characteristics that make those people that you're like don't leave, like I need you, like your favorite developers that you work with? I'm sure they're all your favorite, but like those that you would consider like to be the rock star developers, like period. Like there's no, like you have no words but praise for these people. What would you say, how could you describe one of those type of developers to me, to our audience? Because ultimately, I know that we are all aspiring to be such a great developer, to ultimately make our agencies be distinguished in the industry, to be set apart because of the excellence of the work that we do. So can you talk about that a little bit in your experience?
Yeah, I think from an agency perspective, what you're looking for is you're looking for someone without an ego, someone that's not going to have it their way or dictate their terms, or if things don't go exactly as they planned, that, they can handle that. You're looking for someone that is a great communicator, because great communication is usually a sign of intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence, because if you're doing complicated projects, you're going to need some emotional intelligence sooner or later to not get frustrated, and a curiosity. I think a curiosity, someone who's always tinkering, who's always learning something new, who's always got some side project going on that's having they're building something. Like it may not even be an e-commerce something, right?
Right.
They may be taking apart vintage radios and putting them back together.
Nice, yeah.
They've got this curiosity of how things work, because
That's
it is
really
that
good
understanding of how things work that make you efficient and make it to where you're flexible enough to handle whatever comes at you, and it doesn't have to be something you've seen in the past.
That's good. Yes, exactly. Because with e-commerce, I know there's quite a few requirements that are similar from website to website, and that's the idea of Magento or Shopify or some of that. It accommodates at least for some websites, 80% of the functionality, but there's that 20% that's always different on every single website. And so being able to work through one of those challenges, boy, I've never done that before, right? I mean, that shouldn't be the stopping point. That needs to be the starting point. Boy, I've never done that before. And I totally get it. I think that's great. It's yeah. And I like what you said about so curiosity, you said, was one of those, a great communicator. And speaking for myself, communication is one of those things that I struggle with, because I like to write code. I like to just get in there, do my code thing, and get on to the next ticket, project, whatever it is. And yet I have to communicate back to QA. I have to tell them what I did, or tell them what to test, communicate to another developer, communicate in the form of writing up a merge request, that sort of thing. Can you talk to how you have observed somebody communicates well? Like, in what contexts are they talking? Because ultimately I think we can go to the other end of the extreme. Somebody, instead of asking a one sentence question, it's like 5 sentences, and you kind of never really figure out the question. So how does it work with developers in communication? What really sets apart excellent communicators when someone is an e-commerce developer?
Sure. I think the saying is, if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough, or something to that nature. And so you have to understand that as a developer, you're immersed in a very technical world. You spend all of your time with very technical people, but then as soon as you break out of that bubble, you're dealing with people of all varying technical levels. And so you want to be someone, even in your bubble, you want to be someone who's thorough, that does a great job of breaking down in great detail what you're trying to communicate, that can do it without necessarily using terminology that might be confusing to someone that doesn't understand it. If your sentence has 4 acronyms in it, you're probably not doing a good job explaining it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know if I can necessarily quantify exactly what makes a great communicator, but it's thoroughness. It's the ability to explain something simply. It's also listening. It's not, communication is not just about you providing information. It's about you actually consuming the information that's given to you in an efficient manner as well, which is probably more important, because you can't communicate back if you don't understand what's being asked or being given to you.
That's right.
So, especially if you're getting requirements that are not fully fleshed out. If a merchant is trying to tell you what you want, or your boss is trying to tell you what you need to do, or basically all of these people that have a limited understanding of what they're asking from you, because you're the subject matter expert, you have to be able to consume that information, process it in an efficient manner, find out what the holes are in that information, and either make assumptions or ask the right questions to plug those holes.
That's really good. I love that. I mean, I think that's 100% on point. It's yeah. And I guess the one other thing to add there is the willingness to write in sentences as opposed to code. It's again, it's like, but it calls back, it all ties together. But yeah, just being able to break down those concepts. And I don't know. I think sometimes it's easy as developers, we get into this mode of, we know the high level of stuff and we know the code to write, but at the end of the day, we often don't understand what powers that, how we got to this place. And that's, just very important that we could even say it's easy to copy and paste files. But when at the end of the day, we have to know what's in those files. Just like it's easy to just say, hey, use message queuing or RabbitMQ or something like that, but not understanding like exactly how that works, how to implement that with Magento, that sort of thing. Like it's knowing how to break down those concepts is so important. So absolutely, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, you have to remember, as a person, not just a developer, this is not a problem that's just for developers, but in general, you have to remember that not everyone has your experience.
That's so good. Yes.
Aspect, right? And so they may not understand as much about it as you understand, or they may understand more about it than you understand, depending on the context of the conversation. So don't assume they understand. Make sure you're being real clear about the information you're receiving and the information you're giving.
TJ, I say this with some embarrassment, but it was a few years ago. I will use the excuse that I was young in my career, but I'm 32. I guess you'd say I'm a little bit young, anyways. But I probably was I know I was quite a bit less experienced back then, and there was this one of our merchants that we'd done quite a little work for. He told me on a number of occasions, he said, explain this to me as if you're me. And it was honestly kind of embarrassing for him to say something like that to me, because I was like, well, I should be able to explain this to you. But it's true. Like I had, keeping in mind who I am writing this to, trying to get I had a pretty good idea as far as where he was at with his technical skill set. He was incredibly good at running a business, but obviously that's why he was bringing us in to deal with their technical side. But anyways, yeah, that was one of those things that was embarrassing to hear, but it was very good for me to hear as well.
I was lucky enough at my age, starting really when the internet took off, that those early experiences really set me up for that, in that most of the people I was talking to had no clue. Like they had no clue. So you're having to explain to people that don't know how to type, that don't know what email is, that rarely ever even use the website you're building for them. And so, that really, I think that, and that's helped in our content as well. Just knowing how to speak to those people and making sure we're not communicating in a way that's too far. It's technical, but it's not too far over their head.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Oh, this is good reminders for everybody. This is a perfect episode. Just again talking about, really comes down to developer education, being versed in a wide variety of things, including just e-commerce in general. You might not be a technical architect at this time. You might not be a business practitioner, solution specialist, whatever you want to call that. You might not be a project manager. You might not be an account manager, but still having this breadth of knowledge is very helpful, as well as just great communication, making that effort to becoming a great communicator. So yeah, TJ, I appreciate your thoughts on this. This was a very powerful and positive podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a fun conversation. And again, anytime, I appreciate you having me, and I like what you're doing there at Swift Otter, and anytime I could help, just let me know. Excellent.
Well, make sure to subscribe to, I think your channel is Ecommerce Aholic on YouTube, right? Yes.
Ecommerce Aholic on all the channons.
All the channels. You go push that subscribe button on all the channels, because again, just to reiterate that the zero to hero, $0 to $1 million business, it's probably not going to be the easiest road in the world, but maybe it will be for TJ. He's a great guy. So, but it's going to be a great series to watch, and I've loved the episodes I've watched already, and let's keep them coming, TJ. Thank you for joining here.
Thank you.
Well, that was an excellent episode there, talking just about what does it take to become a great developer, and there was a lot of facets of this. And you'll notice this is a concept that's really, it's really important to me. And obviously, with the whole debugging conversations, that also is very important as well. But this one especially just focused on more of the general aspects of what does it mean to be a great developer. So, thank you for joining. If you haven't already, make sure that you subscribe on our Swift Otter YouTube channel, or subscribe to our podcast, the Smash the Bug podcast, on one of our any one of your favorite platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. We are there. Until next time, thank you for listening to Smash the Bug.